Slide in, slide in, slide in. You're doing so great. You're doing an excellent job sliding. Perfect. All right. All right, Luca, we gotta slide a little bit more though. We gotta make a little bit. There you go, right there. Can we get a minute? All right. And all right. Okay. So, I have a pretty brief sermon for us today. I want to see if it'll make sense. So, how many of you have ever gotten an injury? Have ever got a cut or a scrape? Any of you guys ever? You have a cut? Okay. From your bunny. All right. So you guys are going to understand this. So what do I have here on my finger? What is that? A Band-Aid, right? And why do we put Band-Aids on things? Yeah, I got hurt or something. But yeah, or I'm bleeding, right? But so when I get done and I take this Band-Aid off, will the cut be gone? Could be, right? You know, if it's healed up. All right, at that point, do I say, "Oh, thank you, Band-Aid. Thank you for healing my finger"? No, I don't do that. That'd be silly, right? The Band-Aid helps us, right? But does the Band-Aid heal us? No, our bodies heal us, and our bodies are the way that God made us. So God provides the healing. So even though we have Band-Aids, and we can help somebody with our Band-Aids, again, God is the person that provides the healing. God is the one that deserves the thanksgiving. So remember that when you take off your Band-Aid and you look at that cut that's not there anymore, you can say, "Thank you, God." You don't have to say, "Thank you, Band-Aid." All right. So in order to remember this, I'm going to send you guys home with a Band-Aid, and you can either put it on an injury that you currently have, help somebody else, or wear it on your forehead. Oh, yeah. All right. I know, here you go. There's Band-Aid. All right. God loves you. I love you. Have them back to your seats. Thank you, guys. Need to get my high tech. Maybe. Perfect, right? All right. How's everybody doing this morning? Hanging in there? All right. So, at first glance, our gospel lesson from Luke this morning, from Luke 17, kind of looks like a slam dunk. It looks easy, it looks straightforward. Would anyone be willing to kind of tell me some of the details and sort of sum up this story about Jesus and the lepers? And you are always allowed to cheat off your bulletin or out of your handy-dandy pew Bibles. What's part of the story? Ten lepers. We got 10 lepers, and what do they do? They keep their distance because they are lepers, and back then you had to stay a certain amount of distance away, and then you had to cover your mouth and yell out, "Unclean! Unclean!" I don't know why, but that was how it worked. So they kept their distance. What happens next? What do they cry out for? Yeah, Kyrie eleison. Exactly what we sang earlier. Lord, have mercy. Master, have mercy. What happens next? Yeah, Jesus tells them to go to who? The priest. Show yourself to the priest because you have to be declared clean. And then while they're on their way, one of them notices what? that he is clean, and he does what after that? He comes back and gives thanksgiving, right? So basically, for our sermon today, Jesus wants us to say thank you for the good things in our life, and when we don't say thank you, it makes Jesus very sad. End of sermon, amen, right? Jason says yes. And that would make for a very nice sermon, right? And a very short sermon. How we should be nice to one another. Except, Jesus rarely gives us advice about how to be nice. Jesus rarely talks about how to be polite. Jesus seems rarely concerned with making everyone happy. And so while I do think that God likes to receive praise and thanksgiving from us, I wonder if there is more going on with this story. So I want to think about, we got kind of the gist of the story, but what might there be, what are some of the details that you see that might indicate that there is more going on here than meets the eye? What's the location? All right, so we have a location. All right, and all of you real estate people out there, what's the most important thing ever? All right. So location. So what is the location? Region between Samaria and Galilee. All right. And I want to kind of show you this, but it's not all that helpful because Luke doesn't have the best grasp of geography. Because here's how it kind of works. All right. We have Samaria, which is this kind of area right here. And then we have Galilee, which is up here. And then this is Judea down here. So Jesus is going from Galilee to Jerusalem. And he has to go through Samaria. All right? And we're not exactly sure the path that he's taking, but it sounds like it's like the border, the edge. And it's sort of this idea, we're on the border between two groups of people who have historically struggled to get along. All right? This all used to be Israel. All right? And then after Solomon, I'm going to give you a quick nerdy history lesson. I know most of you guys know this. It split into two kingdoms. It split into the north and it split into the south. And the north and the south, like brothers and sisters, fought. All right, they took slaves and they were generally awful to each other. And then there was another group up here, Assyria, not Syria, Assyria, rolls down and they conquered the northern kingdom in about 700 BC. All right? And the Assyrians were super bad, nasty, terrible people. And what they would do is they would deport a significant amount of your population and take you and scatter you throughout their empire. And then they would bring in people from all over the empire to mix your country up, basically. So that you'd never be able to figure out common stories and all of that ever again. And so the South no longer saw the North as truly Jewish, even though the North still saw themselves as faithfully following the Bible. So basically what I want you to know is that there is bad blood, that there's violence, that there's raids, that there's vandalism of various temples taking place between Samaria, the northern kingdom, and the southern kingdom for 700 years, up to the time of Jesus. So Jesus is telling us a story while standing in the border area between two groups of people who distrust or dislike each other to the point of violence. Suddenly we are in a story that is much more complicated and fraught with danger than our original scenario of an overlooked thank you note. The border area where Jesus stands could be the demilitarized zone between North and South Korea, right? Jesus could be at the Kashmir region between India and Pakistan right now. Or Jesus could be traveling along the northern border of Turkey, where the Kurds are living in southern Syria, getting attacked by the Turks. Or perhaps Jesus could be somewhere along the thousands of miles of our southern border with Mexico. This story takes place between two groups of people who see the other as inferior and possibly dangerous. How does this change how we hear this story? And yet there's even one more detail that leads me to think that we're on the right track, that it's not just about saying thank you, that there is something more going on. What affliction are these 10 men on the border suffering from? Leprosy, all right? Leprosy in the Bible is not the disease that we know now as Legionnaire's disease, all right? So if you're thinking like leprosy now, leprosy then, not the same thing. However, it was any number of skin conditions that someone could be afflicted with. The consequences of all of these diseases were the same. You were cut off from your family and friends. The only people you could associate with were people with a similar disease. People with leprosy were outsiders, possibly dangerous to the community, possibly infectious, right? Now we have a story about Jesus in a border area where two groups of people strongly dislike each other, interacting with a group of guys who have been cast out from the two communities that hate each other. Whew. There are multiple boundaries and borders being crossed and challenged in our gospel story this morning. And I wonder how many of us can relate to this story of borders and boundaries. How many of us have had a disease or had a loved one with a disease and had people treat us like it was catching, even if there was no possible medical way for that to happen? How many of us have felt uncomfortable around a group of people with a different skin color? How many of us have felt uncomfortable or avoided people with different religious or political beliefs? We are altogether too familiar with borders and boundaries and the challenges and sticky situations that those places can entail. So what can we learn from Jesus' actions and words on the border? What is the good news for us in our fragmented world? First and foremost, I think we have to always focus on the fact that Jesus acts to relieve suffering. The lepers cry out for mercy, and Jesus doesn't say, "But who did you vote for in 2016? He doesn't say to the lepers, "What's your green card status?" He doesn't even say, "Which God do you believe in?" Jesus acts, Jesus heals, Jesus always gets to us first. God's forgiveness, God's salvation is not up to us, folks. God has chosen through the death and resurrection of Jesus Christ to claim the world as his own, with no regard for our borders, our boundaries, or our prejudices. This is made clear by Jesus' interaction with the healed leper who was a Samaritan. Does it seem like Jesus thought that Thanksgiving was the appropriate response? Does he seem appreciative that the guy came back and said thank you? Yeah. Does Jesus seem a little bit miffed that the other 9 don't come back? Yeah. And yet at no point does Jesus take back the healing to the other 9, right? He doesn't say, "Well, you didn't come back and said thank you, so it looks like you're lepers again." Or Jesus doesn't say, "Well, I'll never help those people again because they were not adequately grateful." God asks us to relieve suffering, death, and sorrow regardless, often in spite of our response. And perhaps this is a message that we can each take with us today. God's grace refuses to be limited by our actions. We as Christians and we as church are called through our baptism to care for the world and all the people that our God made. And this is why we practice open communion each week here at St. Peter's Lutheran. All are invited forward to receive God's grace and forgiveness, regardless of race, gender, sexuality, age, religious background, political party, or any other made-up distinction that we could possibly come up with. You are welcome. This is why when we go and serve at the Salvation Army or on mission trips, when we give them food, we give it to anybody who is hungry without regard of their manners or of their gratefulness. This is why when we give to ELCA World Hunger, all right? Last year, this church helped to give, overall the ELCA gave over $23 million around our globe. Last year in 61 countries and 43 states here in the United States to help feed in those in need. You are doing this. You are living out this idea that God acts first. I want to end with a thank you. 2 weeks ago, a man came in to worship during the middle of our service. And you may have noticed him, he was acting erratically. And I watched him be given a seat. I watched someone try to hand him a bulletin and try to show him how to participate in the service. I saw people find him a place to wait because he wanted to talk to a pastor. Everything was far from right with this man. He had tumors all over his body. His teeth had mostly rotted away. And there was something else going on. He wasn't really tracking the conversation very well. And yet, for that brief moment, he wasn't cut off. He wasn't outside. He was welcomed here through no doing of his own. Thank you for that, and thanks be to God. In closing, I want to invite us, I want to encourage us this week and others not to allow others to dictate or distract us from God's mission of mercy by their thanksgiving or by their lack thereof. Go in peace to love and serve our Lord.